In the heart of Africa, the village of Namaroko lay like an old scar beneath the punishing sun. The red soil, once alive with millet and song, now cracked open like parched lips yearning for rain. Farming tools lay forgotten beside shriveled crops. Even the children, barefoot and thin, no longer chased each other. They sat in the shadow of a dying fig tree, eyes wide, waiting for something that never came. It had been a decade since the last real rain. And in the silence, hope had dried up too. At the very center of Namaroko stood the bone tree, not named for its color, but for its spirit. Its bark gleamed pale as old bone, untouched by time or termite. Strange symbols, spirals and eyes, were carved deep into its trunk by hands long forgotten. The villagers believed the tree grew from the remains of a cursed child, and so they bowed before it, leaving offerings no god had touched in years. But the bone tree remembered everything, even when the people forgot. Nya, 15 seasons old, walked through the village like a ghost that refused to vanish. Her feet kissed the dust without a sound. Her headscarf was tightly knotted, but her thoughts unraveled like threads in the wind. She saw what others ignored, the hunger in the animals' eyes, the cracking walls of the shrine, the fear behind the elders' sermons. And though her voice was quiet, her gaze pierced through stone. In a corner of her father's hut, Nya unwrapped a bone from an old piece of crimson thread. It was smooth, ancient, and carved with patterns she didn't understand, but felt. It was her mother's last gift before disappearing into the hills. Some said Zuberi was taken by spirits. Others whispered she had become one. But Nya didn't want legends. She wanted answers. And the bone pulsed like it still had something left to say. Her father, Danu, was a blacksmith whose silence roared louder than any hammer. He shaped blades in the dark, sweat pouring from his brow, as if beating back the grief he never spoke of. When Nya asked about Zuberi, he only turned away, mouth shut, eyes glistening. But that night, as he saw his daughter staring at the bone, he paused, and something unspoken passed between them, like a storm on the edge of memory. Under the pale crescent moon, the people of Namaroko gathered at the bone tree with heads bowed and hearts cracked. Some held dried yams. Others burned old herbs or chanted names of ancestors. They prayed, not with belief, but with habit. The clouds never answered. But still, they knelt. Still, they begged. Because it was easier to plead than to change. Nya watched from the distance, the bone warm in her palm. When the village slept, Nya walked alone to the bone tree. The wind had gone still. No animals stirred. It was as if the world held its breath. She knelt, heart pounding, and placed the bone into the earth beneath the tree. "I don't want your blessings," she whispered. "I want the truth." Nothing moved. Nothing answered. But when she stood, the wind sighed, and the bone was gone. That night, sleep took her into a place beyond time. She stood before a glowing cave, its entrance shrouded in mist. Inside, bones lined the walls like sacred books. A figure stepped forward, neither man nor woman, wrapped in black feathers, holding a staff crowned with a skull. "Truth is not hidden," the voice said. "It is buried." And then the ground trembled with something ancient. Nya jolted awake, the dream still heavy in her chest. Her palms were smeared with mud. The red thread had vanished. Outside, the sky had changed, not with rain, but with tension. As if the clouds were listening again. As if the dream had left a mark. Something had shifted in the earth. And something inside her had begun to wake. She stood before the elders, men and women who clung to old truths like worn cloaks. She told them of the cave. The feathers. The message. Elder Aro spat into the dust. "Madness," he muttered. "Just like her mother." But Mama Olo leaned forward, eyes wet. "She is the echo," she said. "Zuberi lives in her." And the others fell into uneasy silence. That evening, her father said nothing as Nya packed dried roots in a flask. When she turned to leave, he placed a cloth-wrapped dagger in her palm. "Your mother carved it from ram's horn," he said. "It was meant for you." Their eyes met for only a moment. It held everything, sorrow, fear, pride. And then he turned back to the forge, letting the silence speak for him. She journeyed through tangled hills where the wind still whispered old names. Vines clawed at her legs. Birds watched with knowing eyes. The deeper she went, the more the land began to speak, not in words, but in signs. She followed a path her feet had never walked but her soul remembered. Somewhere ahead, the cave called to her like a buried heartbeat. Tucked between the ribs of two ancient hills, she found the cave, just as in her dream. Its entrance was smothered in moss and guarded by roots that hung like fingers. Bones dangled from the vines, gently swaying in a wind that didn't blow. Above the mouth of the cave, carved deep into a stone arch, was the spiral sun, the mark of her bloodline. She lit a torch, exhaled once, and stepped into the dark. The cave was cold, breathing softly like it had lungs. Bones stood in shelves, curved and polished, stacked neatly like sacred scrolls. Skulls with hollow eyes watched her from the stone. Strange symbols crawled across the walls, some dancing, some weeping. The torch in her hand flickered violently as if nervous. But she walked deeper, deeper still, until the floor began to hum beneath her feet. Part of the cave sat a basin of stone shaped like a giant open palm. Inside, a single skull, cracked, delicate, yet pulsing with pale blue light, awaited her. Nya fell to her knees. She didn't have to ask. She knew whose it was. Mother, she whispered. The torch died. And yet the basin glowed brighter, as if recognizing its name spoken through love. From the shadow stepped the guardian of her dream, a figure robed in feathers, skin painted with ash, eyes blazing with stormlight. You are the blood key, he said. You are the one who must unbury what your ancestors sealed. The wall behind him lit with glowing glyphs. He gestured. And when Nya placed the skull against the stone, the entire cave shivered. The bones hummed like drums. The air wept. And far above them, the sky cracked. In Namaroko, the heavens finally opened. A single drop struck the bone tree, then another, and then a downpour that sent everyone running, not away, but toward it. Children laughed like they'd found treasure. Women lifted their arms to the sky. Old men fell to their knees and wept. And in the mud, they danced barefoot, not caring about being clean, only that they were alive again. With the rain came something else. From the soaked earth, bones began to rise, gently, without violence. Femurs and hands and jawbones, not to frighten, but to return. The bone tree groaned softly as new faces formed in its bark. Ancestors. Children. Forgotten villagers whose names had been lost. Namaroko was remembering itself, one bone at a time. At sunrise, Nya returned. Her feet sank into the wet soil. Her skin gleamed with rain. She held the skull like a lantern, like a child, like the truth itself. The villagers made no sound as she passed. Some bowed. Others simply watched, wide-eyed. No one called her mad now. No one dared. She wasn't just the blacksmith's daughter anymore. She was the voice that called the storm home. The elders stood no taller than the grass now. Their robes clung to them like guilt. Elder Aro cried openly, his voice broken by shame. We buried truth and called it wisdom, he said. Mama Olo took Nya's hand, pressed a bead into her palm. For the next girl, she whispered, who dares to listen? And in that moment, a new elder was born, not by age, but by truth. Beneath the shadow of the bone tree, Nya sat among children with curious eyes and open hearts. She didn't teach through scrolls or lectures. She taught through song, story, and soil. She showed them how to read the wind, how to listen when the trees shift, how to braid strength into their hair. She told them, again and again, the sky does not belong to the powerful. It listens to the bold. Namaroko erupted in celebration. Faces were painted with streaks of blue and gold. Drums thumped like thunder. Smoked cassava and honeyed bread passed from hand to hand. The bone tree stood radiant, rain dripping from its limbs like tears of joy. And in the middle of it all, Nya danced. Not like a goddess, not like a savior, but like a girl who listened, who remembered, and who returned. At dusk, Nya returned to the shrine. She carried a small wooden carving of her mother, Zuberi, a face she only remembered in dreams. She placed it beneath the roots, where the first bone had been. Thank you for hiding the storm, she whispered, and for teaching me to set it free. The wind stirred gently. A single leaf fell. And in the stillness, Nya felt her mother smile. At sunrise, she stood alone at the edge of a new beginning. The field shimmered green and wild. A rainbow curled across the sky like a whispered vow. The drum at her side was quiet, but inside her, it thundered. She had become more than her name. She was the bridge between what was buried and what was remembered. And now, even the sky bowed when she walked. Under the moon's soft eye, the bone tree glowed with memory. Children slept curled at its roots, their dreams full of clouds and courage. Nya sat beside them, tapping her mother's drum in a slow, steady rhythm. Her voice danced through the night air, telling stories of rain, of roots, of girls who dared to ask. And far above, the sky whispered her name, not in thunder, but in song. The bone whisperer had come home. And the earth, at last, remembered how to sing.